For the fifth Sunday of Lent, the church shares with us the story of the raising of Lazarus, and there's a lot that's curious about it. For one thing, Jesus' love for Martha, Mary, and Lazarus. He says that this illness is not to end in death, and yet he waits 2 days out of love for his friends before he goes to address their needs. And by the time he gets there, Lazarus is dead. And Martha, her using the right words with Jesus, but does she really understand what he intends to do in raising Lazarus from the dead? And does she really understand what it means to rise with Jesus at the end of time? I mean, all of these things are just interesting. And then on a human level, Jesus' own emotion and sorrow at the death of his friend, the sorrow of his sorrow at the grief of Martha and Mary and those who had gathered to console them. And his own heart, his own human heart, revealing the heart of the Father in heaven as well. It's one of the most maybe moving moments in all of the Gospels, that Jesus wept. He wept for his friend Lazarus. We hear that throughout the funeral rites. In some of the petitions, Jesus wept for his friend Lazarus, and so it's okay for us to weep for our friends as well, but also it shows us our need to reach out to Jesus in our own grief. And I just prayed with a family who had just lost a loved one, and the gospel that the church, again, provides for us in that moment is, this one, the raising of Lazarus. And I think one of the most comforting things is to know that Jesus wept over his friend Lazarus, but Jesus also weeps over all of his disciples, and that we have to suffer the consequences of sin having entered the world. But it isn't just that we have to, suffer those consequences of sin in the world. It's also that Jesus really has allowed us to share in his cross, to share in his work of redemption for ourselves, for the whole world. But it's through the cross, through our suffering, through death, that he has paved a way for us to attain eternal life. And so on the other side of what we experience, even in our suffering, even in our death, is the promise that God has made to us. So, on the one hand, we can ask the question, why? On the other hand, we can ask the question of how can I more deeply enter into this mission of Jesus that he has shared with me, so lovingly shared with me, that I might not just partake in the cup of suffering, but that I might share in the rising from the dead on the other side of suffering and death. So, we have this moment here this Sunday, knowing the human heart of Jesus, revealing the heart of the Father, but most especially, it ought to be pointing us and preparing us for our celebration of the resurrection, but most especially as we enter into our own sufferings and death, that we might share in the hope of the joy of the resurrection in the life to come.